Hello there, friends. Hope you're doing well today. Welcome into the Weekday Bible Study. If this is your first time checking this out, I'm just excited that you're here with us. So thank you so much for studying with us today. We're going through the book of Judges together. And if you just joined us today for the first time, this is a great day to join us, because the past couple of days as we've gone through the book of Judges have really just been introductory remarks. We've really seen that in the years after Joshua, that Israel really has failed to maintain their relationship with God. They failed to raise their children in the way of the Lord, and that has come back to haunt them, and has really harmed them. And so, what God is going to do is He is going to basically He has left them, in one sense, it left them to their own devices as they've chosen to follow other gods. But at the same time, God is really concerned for them, and He is going to establish a series of judges that are going to rise up to redeem them. And so that's kind of the purpose of what God's doing here. And today we're gonna meet our first judge today, and I'm excited about that, to do that with you. But first, I have to talk about a catastrophe I have. I have my coffee happening here. I got to tell you, I used every coffee bean in my house for this pot of coffee. Which means that, well, every roasted one, which means that if I do not roast coffee today, tomorrow is going to be the not greatest day in the world for me. So I will be roasting coffee later today. If anybody would like to know how that happens, give me a text. I can have you drop by and watch, because, you know, it's amazing to do such glorious things. Okay, now that we're done with that, let's move into the Bible study. Judges chapter 3. I'm going to start reading at verse 7. We're only going to do a few verses today, but what we're talking about today, I believe, is just hugely significant, very, very important. And so I want to talk about these things with you. So here's what it says. It says, and the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. They forgot the Lord their God. They served the Baals and the Asheroth. Therefore the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of the Cushan Rishathaim king of Mesopotamia. And the people of Israel served Cushan Rishathaim 8 years. That's a really hard word to say fast. I'm just saying, I'm going to screw that word up like 1,000 times whenever we're talking today, because it's really hard to say. But what I will say is people have the book of Judges is one of those books that people take issue with in regard to God, right? They take a lot of issue with it. And I think the reason that people take issue with the book of Judges is because it talks in detail about the Lord's anger. God's anger rises up against Israel in a very real, very powerful way. And God is not shy to tell us that he's angry with them, okay? He is not going to hide his anger from us. He's not hiding his anger from them. God is angry about their rebellion against him. And that's really what's happened here, right? We talked yesterday about how these children arose, this generation arose after the original faithful generation went to be with their father. A generation arose that did not know God, which means that their parents did not instill in them faith in the one true God. Instead, actually, their parents didn't honor God in the way that they did their dealings, and so they allowed other cultures to mingle into their midst, and the other cultures that they allowed to mingle into their midst because of what God had purposed for Israel was a real problem. They brought with them false gods, pagan gods, idols that they worshipped, and the people began to intermarry, and there was a real big problem, right? They forgot the Lord their God. It said in verse 7, they served the Baals and the Asheroth. The Baals are false gods. The Asheroth is one of those false gods. She is a goddess, and she is most commonly referred to as like a wooden post or pole. She's a very sexual goddess. And so we can see that people are turning to idols of all kinds. They're turning to idols of all kinds. And so the people of Israel, who should be worshiping the one true God, are instead worshiping false gods. That angers the Lord, not in the way that you and I think, though. I think sometimes when we read the anger of the Lord, whenever we read that something angers God, I think sometimes what we perceive is that God is angry in the way that you or I might get angry. And when you or I get angry, oftentimes we get angry in disproportionate or inappropriate ways, right? God's anger exists not in a disproportionate or unrighteous way. God's anger is a righteous anger. God has saved these people. He's redeemed these people from slavery. He has offered them a better life, and they have neglected to follow him in spite of the fact that he rescued them. They've chosen for themselves, as the New Testament would say, to become slaves to sin even after God had done the work to free them. So God's anger is really a situational anger. God is, as much as he's frustrated with the people, God is frustrated with the reality. And the reality that exists is that these people are still not choosing him. That's what frustrates him. So it says the people of Israel served this other nation for 8 years. In other words, in reality, they became slaves once again. Verse 9, when the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. So somewhere along the way, somebody remembered something that they learned in Sunday school, and that there was a God of Israel that at one point had freed them from slavery, right? When the people of Israel cried out to the Lord raised up a deliverer for the people of Israel who saved them. So we can see that God's anger isn't a hate-filled thing. It's not what you and I think of in terms of anger. It is a very just and righteous anger. God raised up a deliverer for the people of Israel who saved them. Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. Okay, now question for you. And I wish that we were in person. We'd do a show of hands. Who's heard of Samson, right? Everybody's hand pops up. Who's heard of Othniel? Nobody's hand pops up, right? Nobody really knows who Othniel is. Nobody really knows who Othniel is because his story isn't like his story is not as glamorous as that of Samson. It's very short, very brief, very technical, very sterile, right? Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, the Spirit of the Lord was upon him, it says, upon Othniel, and he judged Israel. He went out to war, and the Lord gave Cushan and Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia, into his hand, and his hand prevailed over Cushan Rishathaim. So the land had rest 40 years. Then Othniel, the son of Kenaz, died. Okay, so basically what that is saying, okay, what we're seeing there is that Othniel is almost like the opposing picture of Israel. So you probably don't remember this because it was almost like a footnote in the text. But if you were to go back to chapter 1, Caleb, who is a man who's referenced a lot in the book of Joshua, he's also referenced in Exodus. He's a very faithful man. Caleb allowed his daughter to marry somebody who performed a great task, right? And the person who performed a great task was Caleb's little brother's son, Othniel. And so Othniel married Caleb's daughter. That's what Caleb offered in return for this task, okay? Othniel married Caleb's daughter. So while the people of Israel were, as we found out yesterday, as they were intermarrying with all of these pagan gods, right? Othniel was marrying someone who grew up in a household of faith, right? Othniel is a person upon whom the Spirit of the Lord came, where Israel is a group of people at this point who had arose to not know who God was. Israel was fighting against God. When Othniel led Israel into war, he was fighting with God. Israel was overcome, but through the leadership of Othniel, Israel prevailed, right? So he's like this antithesis, or antithesis of everything that Israel is, right? And so I think it's important for us at this point to understand just how good Othniel was. Othniel will become, this is why I think he's so important, and I want you to remember his name, okay? So remember the name of Othniel. He will become the judge by whom all other judges will be judged, okay? So know that. Like, Othniel is the ideal judge. He is a man who has been faithful his entire life, upon whom the Spirit of God came, who led well, who served well, and who brought the people back to God, so that throughout the course of his life and then after, because if you were to do the math, it would make sense that Othniel would have died before the 40 years of faith came up, because if he would have lived the entire time, he would have died at like 125 years old. Okay, so Othniel should have died before then. So, as I said, the book of Judges isn't always in chronological order. But because of him, he gave the land rest. And that word rest is a really, really interesting word. Whenever you read rest in scripture, it's not just talking about like, okay, we're good now. Rest in scripture is like an idealized moment of peace. It's almost like heaven on earth, or maybe if you were Buddhist, you would say it's almost like nirvana, right? Rest is this concept in biblical terms where like everything is good, everything is taken care of, like needs are met, like things are amazing. Like, that's what rest is. And the Bible tells us through Othniel's leadership, what he did as judge of Israel, that they experienced 40 years of rest, right? And then it says Othniel died, and he did. And tomorrow we're going to find out what happened after that. But there you go. Remember the name of Othniel. He's going to come up again. We're going to talk about him some more as we talk about some later judges. And people, like I said, Samson is so much more famous than Othniel. Samson really was a terrible, horrible, no good, really bad judge. Othniel was really, really, really good. And so maybe he should be more famous than Samson. he just doesn't get as much airplay. That's it for today. Love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions or you want to leave a comment, I would love to read your comments. I love to read comments. So if you leave a comment, that's great. If you could share this video with one person that you think would find it helpful. Maybe you know somebody who you want to encourage to begin reading scripture or studying scripture a little bit. Just share this with them. Say, hey, you know what? Just watch this 15-minute video. I think you'll find it helpful. That would be awesome. And of course, subscribe to the channel. You can click the bell icon to receive notifications when we go live. Love you guys. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.